It's interesting in medical malpractice cases that oftentimes the legal issues are not terribly complex. It's the medical issues that are really complex. The legal issues are basically, was somebody negligent and did they cause an injury? And if so, what are the injuries and what's that worth? Those are, on that very basic level, pretty simple questions to answer. Now, it's more complicated than that. It's the medical issues that are really complicated. And oftentimes, sometimes you have to understand when you're looking at a case that might go to trial in 2 years and deciding whether or not you want to invest and pursue this case is, can I explain this to a jury that's going to understand it, or is it going to be too complicated medical-wise for them to really understand this? And that's really one of the things you have to look at, which gets back to what I tell clients all the time, which is a lot of times the medical error is just something based upon human frailty and human ignorance versus something that's complicated. If you start getting into complicated medical issues, those cases are much more difficult. If it's something that can be explained away by a doctor just being lazy and not caring, and we see a lot of that. Those are cases juries really understand and probably they've experienced. Timeline for a birth or brain injury or medical malpractice case involves kind of two separate timelines. One is the initial evaluation part of the case, which is you have to evaluate the case, get the records, get experts involved, and determine, is this a case where we can establish negligence and causation? Do we have that? That takes time. That takes a number of months to establish that. Then the next question is, when is the appropriate time to file the case? Because it is the plaintiff's burden, the patient's burden to establish with an expert what are the damages. Oftentimes when people come to me, their damages aren't readily apparent yet, or we don't really know what they're going to be in 1, 5, 10, and 20 years. So we need to know that. We can't guess at that. We have to have an expert get up on the stand and say to a reasonable medical certainty, this is how this patient's going to be in 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years. Oftentimes that's not clear at that point, even though we know there's been a catastrophic injury. Once the lawsuit has been filed, the courts in California will typically give you a trial date within about a year to 2 years from the time you file it. And that's typically the time frame within which the case would be resolved by going to a mediation or a settlement conference and getting the case settled. Yes, we just resolved a case, settled a case on behalf of a severely brain injured baby, which was just an awful preventable situation. And this is one of the cases where we knew right away at birth that this child was going to need round-the-clock nursing care forever. An absolutely catastrophic and absolutely preventable problem. The problem was simply because the doctor didn't care and the doctor was just being lazy. The doctor had come in to evaluate my client who was in labor. The baby was clearly in distress, but the doctor wanted to earn some more money by going to assist another doctor on another delivery so he could bill for that process. That other delivery where the mother was completely normal, there was no emergency at all. So he left my client who's having an emergency to go deliver another baby and help another physician who really didn't need the help, just so he could bill the $1,000 to assist on that. Absolutely awful situation, and the hospital went along with it, and it was just a classic example of a doctor just trying to get away with stuff, being lazy, not caring, just an absolutely terrible situation. If you think you've been a potential victim of a medical malpractice case, my advice would be to call me. I spend probably 70% of my professional time talking to people whose cases I don't take, who's just giving out advice to people who have concerns about malpractice and advising them that no, you don't really have a case and here's why, or you might have a case but here's the difficulties, or you do have a case, I can help you with it. I know a lot of the people that handle malpractice cases in California, and they don't spend much of their time advising people about this. People need to understand the nuances of these cases and what the problems are. I tell people this all the time. Establishing the malpractice in the cases, oftentimes that's the easy part. Okay, somebody commits malpractice, anyone can spot that, that's easy. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen after that. The issues of causation, the issues of damages, financing the case, what are the damages? There's a lot of other factors that need to go in. And I spend a lot of my time simply talking to people about all of those issues that frankly they've never thought of. And 99% of the time they walk away very grateful that somebody who has had experience dealing with this, explaining to them the good parts and the bad parts and the difficulties of a case.